Picture a time when danger lurked around every tree, when staying alive meant more than just having muscles, it demanded brains. Way back in the old days, deep inside an untamed jungle, people figured out something incredible. No fancy metal, no leather, no modern tools, just nature. They turned the jungle itself into their armor, a shield so tough it could block a blade, and yet felt like nothing at all. This wasn't magic, it was pure know-how. Let me tell you, the jungle was their workshop and every part of it was useful. The vines that looked plain to outsiders, they were tougher than any rope. People learned to weave them in a special way, leaves that didn't tear easily. They made sure to layer them in a pattern that would turn away sharp edges. The bark, they'd soak it, treat it with natural oils, and let it dry into plates that could handle crushing blows. Each piece wasn't picked because it looked cool or was the right size. It was all about survival, because messing up meant death. The warriors moved like ghosts, knowing what they wore would protect them even against the toughest enemies. Now, this armor wasn't a one-night thing. It took generations to make. People kept learning and getting better at it over many, many years. Families shared weaving patterns and recipes for treating the materials, whispering them as lessons beside campfires. Knowledge wasn't written down in books, but passed on through hands that shaped the vines, through fingers that tied the leaves, and through hearts that trusted the gifts of nature. The jungle wasn't just their home. It was a treasure chest full of armor. Anyone who wanted protection had to listen to its lessons. What's the coolest part? Even after hundreds of years, bits of this know-how are still around. Explorers have found pieces of jungle armor, and even today, scientists can't get over how strong those old vines are, or how well the bark held up. They scratch their heads wondering how people back then could have come up with such cool tech without modern science. But the answer isn't in labs, it's in respecting nature's designs. Think about it. Could we learn from this today? Could nature's solutions help us make stronger, lighter, and more eco-friendly protective gear? The secrets hidden in those ancient jungles are challenging us to look beyond steel and plastic. They're showing us a way to make armor from things that grow all around us. But for now, let's go back to that time. Let's talk about what life was like when people lived deep in the jungle long before modern times. Back then, the jungle was their whole world. It was where they lived, hunted, and found everything they needed. It was also full of dangers like fierce animals, tricky swamps, and enemies from other tribes. So the people there had to be really smart and brave to survive. They learned to read the jungle like a book. They knew which plants could heal them when they were sick, and which ones could harm their enemies. They used the jungle's gifts to make tools, weapons, and even clothes. They made spears from strong wood and sharp stones. They used vines as ropes and leaves as blankets, chopped trees to make canoes and fish traps. They built houses from bamboo and thatched roofs. Everything they needed, they got from the jungle. But being close to nature also meant dealing with its challenges. Storms, floods, and insects were part of their lives. People had to be ready for anything. That's why they started thinking of ways to protect themselves and their loved ones from the worst the jungle could throw at them. They noticed that some plants were tougher than others. Certain vines were harder to break than thick leather. Some leaves didn't tear easily, and some barks were as strong as ironwood. These became their first armor. Of course, simply using these tough plants wasn't enough. It took a lot of effort to harvest, process, and put them together in a way that made sense. But slowly, bit by bit, they figured it out. They learned how to cut the vines without wasting the material. They learned how to dry the leaves without making them brittle. They learned how to shape the bark without making it too stiff. It wasn't easy. It took lots of patience and skill. But as they kept trying, they got better and better. They developed special tools for cutting, drying, and shaping. They came up with clever ways to join the pieces together. They figured out how to make them fit the body without weighing it down. But it wasn't just about the techniques. It was also about understanding the plants themselves. They learned about their properties, strengths, and weaknesses. They learned how to use them in different combinations to get the most out of them. They learned how to take care of them so they lasted longer, even learned how to improve them by adding extra stuff like animal fat or clay. Over time, their armor became more and more sophisticated. They started using multiple layers of different materials to create a shield that was almost impenetrable. They started using geometric patterns to distribute the force of impacts. They started using natural dyes to camouflage themselves in the jungle. They even started using symbols and decorations to express their identity and bravery. But it wasn't just about the armor, it was also about the people who wore it. As the armor became part of their everyday lives, it became part of their culture, their customs, their traditions. It became a symbol of their connection to the jungle, their respect for nature, and their determination to survive. These people weren't afraid of hard work. They enjoyed it. They took pride in it. They saw it as a way to express themselves, to show off their skills, to impress their peers. They made armor for everyone, men, women, children, even animals. They made armor for hunting, fishing, farming, fighting, dancing, celebrating. They made armor for every occasion, and they weren't afraid of sharing their knowledge. They taught anyone who was willing to learn, anyone who was curious, anyone who needed it. They didn't keep secrets. They spread them. They made armor together. They improved it together. They wore it together. They became known as the masters of the jungle armor, the people who could turn plants into protection, who could turn nature into a shield, who could turn the jungle into their armor.